Good afternoon and welcome to number 27 in the Read Through the Bible series. We're up to chapter 50 of Genesis. Just remember that Jacob has just died after he got Joseph to promise that he would take him back to the land of Canaan to be buried with Abraham and Isaac and their wives. Chapter 50. Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. That was typical of the Egyptians, of course, the embalming of important people in Egypt. So the physicians embalmed Israel being Jacob. 40 days were required for it, for that is how many are required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. And when the days of weeping for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, "If now I have found favour in your eyes, please speak in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, I'm about to die. In my tomb that I hewed out for myself in the land of Canaan, there shall you bury me. Now therefore, let me please go up and bury my father, then I will return." And Pharaoh answered, "Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear." So Joseph went up to bury his father. With him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as all the household of Joseph, his brothers, and his father's household. Only their children, their flocks and their herds were left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen. It was a very great company. And when they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there with a very great and grievous lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father 7 days. When the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning on the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning by the Egyptians." Therefore the place was named Abel Mizraim. It is beyond the Jordan. Abel Mizraim, of course, means mourning or meadow of Egypt. In this case, it would be mourning of Egypt. Thus his sons did for him as he had commanded them. For his sons carried him to the land of Canaan, and buried him in the cave of the field at Machpelah, to the east of Mamre, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite, to possess as a burying place. After he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father." Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about that many people should be kept alive, as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's house. Joseph lived 110 years. Remember, Abraham lived 175, Isaac 180, Jacob 147, beg your pardon, and now Joseph only 110. And I shouldn't say only, 110 is still a ripe old age. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the 3rd generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were counted as Joseph's own. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, But God will visit you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, "God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here." So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. And that brings us to the end of the book of Genesis. We'll continue in Exodus next time, but we'll stop right there for Genesis. Next time in Exodus, we come to a number of years later, and Moses is born. Let's turn over to the book of Psalms. We'll read Psalm 6 together. "To the choir master with stringed instruments, according to the Sheminith," probably a musical or a liturgical term. We don't know for sure. It's a psalm of David. "O Lord, rebuke me not in anger, nor discipline me in your wrath. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for I am languishing. Heal me, O Lord, for my bones are troubled. My soul also is greatly troubled. But you, O Lord, how long? Turn, O Lord, deliver my life. Save me for the sake of your steadfast love. For in death there is no remembrance of you. In Sheol who will give you praise? I am weary with my moaning. Every night I flood my bed with tears. I drench my couch with my weeping. My eye wastes away because of grief. It grows weak because of all my foes. Depart from me, all you workers of evil, for the Lord has heard the sound of my weeping. The Lord has heard my plea. The Lord accepts my prayer. All my enemies shall be ashamed and greatly troubled. They shall turn back and be put to shame in a moment." As is usual for David's Psalms, he starts off pleading with the Lord to deliver him from a situation, and usually it's because of opposition to him. Others perhaps persecuting him in one way or another. But he always ends in a praise for God, already praising God for turning things around and for giving him the victory. Let's continue reading. Psalm 7, a Shiggaion of David. Sheminith, Shiggaion, again, probably a musical or liturgical term. A Shiggaion of David, which he sang to the Lord concerning the words of Cush, a Benjamite. O Lord my God, in you do I take refuge. Save me from all my pursuers and deliver me, lest like a lion they tear my soul apart, rending it in pieces with none to deliver. O Lord my God, if I have done this, if there is wrong in my hands, if I have repaid my friend with evil, or plundered my enemy without cause, let the enemy pursue my soul and overtake it, and let him trample my life to the ground and lay my glory in the dust. Arise, O Lord, in your anger, and lift yourself up against the fury of my enemies. Awake for me. You have appointed a judgment. Let the assembly of the peoples be gathered about you. Over it return on high. The Lord judges the peoples. Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness and according to the integrity that is in me. O let the evil of the wicked come to an end, and may you establish the righteous, you who test the minds and hearts. O righteous God, my shield is with God, who saves the upright in heart. God is a righteous judge, and a God who feels indignation every day. If a man does not repent, God will whet his sword. That means sharpen it. He has bent and readied his bow. He has prepared for him his deadly weapons, making his arrows fiery shafts. Behold, the wicked man conceives evil, and is pregnant with mischief, and gives birth to lies. He makes a pit, digging it out, and falls into the hole that he has made. His mischief returns upon his own head, and on his own skull his violence descends. I will give to the Lord the thanks due to his righteousness, and I will sing praise to the name of the Lord, the Most High. each of these psalms, they may start off as prayers and as pleadings, but they always end up with praise for God. And we can learn from that. Let's turn over to the book of Matthew. So we're reading from Matthew chapter 27. Jesus is delivered to Pilate. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. And they bound him and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate the governor. Now you've got to understand something here. The Jews themselves, although they would agree that someone deserved the death penalty, had no jurisdiction. They didn't have the legal right to put anyone to death. They had to go to the Romans themselves, the governor in this case, Pilate. Pontius Pilate was the governor of Judea, and Herod was the tetrarch of Galilee, and so on. Philip, his brother, another area there. But Pilate was the governor of this particular area, and so they took him to Pilate to get that death sentence that they had proclaimed, to get it verified, to get it to basically a signature on it. Then when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." They said, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." And throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed and went and hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, "It is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since it is blood money." So they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. Sometimes people from different countries who were Jewish proselytes, they'd converted to Judaism. Sometimes they died in Jerusalem, and they needed a place to bury them. So they bought this burial plot. Probably the useful clay had been taken out, and so now this field was useless for anything except for this, burying strangers. So they bought the potter's field. Therefore that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. Sometimes they say the prophet Jeremiah, meaning all of those prophets from there. It was in the book of Zechariah, actually. Saying, "They took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him on whom a price had been set by some of the sons of Israel, and they gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me." Now Jesus stood before the governor, that's Pontius Pilate, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You have said so." That means yes. But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now, at the feast, the governor was accustomed to release to the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. And they then had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" Who is called Christ? Now that's interesting. Christ means Messiah. So Pilate himself recognized that Jesus was claiming, or some were claiming, that Jesus was the promised Messiah. That's a big promise. That's because the Jews had been looking out for their Messiah for years and years. For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. He knew that those chief priests and the leaders of the Jews didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a murderer. To ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" They said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" They all said, "Let him be crucified." And he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So, when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." And all the people answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." Then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. Scourging was very, very cruel. It was a whipping, but the whip had in its strands pieces of bone or metal. So scourging was serious. Now you might wonder, why would all of these people be calling out, "Crucify him"? Well, you remember it is the Passover, and there's a lot of people from different parts of the world that have come for this feast. It's a major feast. Also, it's in Jerusalem. It's not in the northern parts where Jesus did most of his miracles, around the Sea of Galilee. No, it's to the south, closer to the Dead Sea, actually, in Jerusalem. So many of the people would not have known Jesus at all. There were some who knew him, of course, and they were horrified that Jesus would be crucified. But the majority could be swayed by the chief priests and the elders of the people. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him, and stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head, and put a reed in his right hand, and kneeling before him they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spit on him, and took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him, and led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. They compelled this man to carry his cross. Jesus could have been significantly weakened by the scourging which he received. But it does say in another place that he carried the cross after Jesus. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his garments among them by casting lots. Dividing the garments of Jesus by casting lots is a prophecy found in Psalm 22. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there. And over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." So also the chief priests, with the scribes and elders, mocked him, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. He's the King of Israel, let him come down now from the cross, and we'll believe in him. He trusts in God, let God deliver him now, if he desires him. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" And the robbers who were crucified with him also reviled him in the same way. We'll read a little later in the Gospel of Luke that one of the robbers changes his mind, or rebukes the other one, and asks Jesus if he'd remember him when he comes into his kingdom. So there was one robber who repented. Now from the 6th hour, that's midday, there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour, 3 o'clock. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani." That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It's also the very first verse in Psalm 22. And some of the bystanders, hearing it, said, "This man is calling Elijah." Eli means my God, but they were mistaking it for the calling of Elijah. And one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But the other said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him." And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice, and yielded up his spirit. Often those who were crucified could last for several days, crucified. But because the next day was going to be a holy day, in this case the Roman soldiers would break the legs, just to make sure that those crucified would die that day before sunset, because they'd suffocate, you see. Behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus yielded up his spirit, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. The tombs were open, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. But there we have the curtain of the temple. What was that curtain? Well, only the priests were allowed into the temple. And the temple had two portions, the holy place and the most holy place. And there was a curtain between those two portions. Only the high priest was allowed into the most holy place. And that curtain separated the two, and the high priest went in there once a year on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. What happens when Jesus dies? Well, the curtain of the temple is torn in two, from top to bottom. This wasn't man's doing, this was God's doing. And that indicated that the way into God's presence, the most holy place, was now open to all who believed on the Lord Jesus Christ, all for whom Jesus had died, can come into the most holy place, can come directly to God in prayer. When the centurion and those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, "Truly, this was the Son of God." There were also many women there looking on from a distance, who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, among whom were Mary Magdalene. He cast out 7 demons from Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. That's the mother of James and John. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea, named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him, and Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud, and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had cut in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember how that impostor said while he was still alive, 'After 3 days I will rise.' Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people, 'He has risen from the dead,' and the last fraud will be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can." So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard. Sealing the stone was putting a big X across the stone with rope from the top to the diagonally across, and then having where they crossed, having the seal there, and the guard was set. Well, that takes us to the end of Matthew, and we'll stop there for today. Thank you for joining us, and hope that you will come and join us again tomorrow.